a position on where they came from, simply when they lived. And so that's what my model tries to do. Nice braces, by the way. I think it's illicit hermeneutically to import the pre-incarnate Christ into the Genesis narrative. I think as Old Testament scholars, we want to try to understand what the author and his audience would have understood this to mean. And so I see no basis at all for thinking that prior to his virginal conception, there was actually another incarnation of the second person of the Trinity. I think that's a kind of theological concordism akin to reading modern science into the narrative. Now you're reading modern Christology into the narrative.
With a no Adam view.
Right. Let me preface with one quick comment. My view of Scripture, the Genesis account, doesn't really make a claim about whether it points to anything in particular about whether there is or isn't historically an Adam and Eve. My point is that Genesis, the author, I think, believes there is an original human couple, and that this tradition then becomes a part of the whole Jewish and Christian tradition. I don't expect him as an ancient author to tell me about science and modern science. So when I turn to the science, I'm just looking to see what the science says. I'm not trying to take an ancient text and turn it into a scientific text. If it turns out that, there was an original human couple in the evolutionary process, okay. I don't think that's the case. I think there's speciation is always true. When you have a species, it never starts off with a million exemplars, right? You have a smaller group. So, if a speciation is viewed as a group of 10,000 or 1,000, that still isn't 2, right? So you have to get down to 2. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that I wouldn't base it on Scripture. I would base it on science. And if the science says there was 2, good. There was 2, and good for us because it matches what we would like to be biblical, right? That said, this does mean that for me, all Christians and Jews have inherited this notion about what the world, the human condition is like, and they trace it back to the sin of the original couple. It makes sense for Paul to say, just as all of this mess came from one guy that we know about in the past and his wife, so God has spoken and has become one of us in Jesus Christ and has healed that and is sort of the counterweight as the one who overcomes the temptation and is truly faithful to God even though he is human. So, I think in each age, in each period, all of us make arguments, theological arguments, with the pieces we have available at that time. Later, people will look at our theological arguments and go, oh, I can't believe you tried that piece. But we do the same thing that they did. They used Jewish hermeneutical methods. They used, in Hebrews, they used Neoplatonic interpretations, right? When you get to Augustine, he's all into Platonism. When you get to Aquinas, he's all into, Thomism. My point is we all interpret that way. I wouldn't criticize Paul for it. I would, though, maybe criticize us if we live in an age where we can tell things are otherwise, but we don't have the courage to admit it. I think for that, we are accountable to God as our authority. That doesn't mean I'm right. It does mean that I think we're accountable to God for how we manage this in a world of a lot of people who, as far as I know, would never believe a literal Genesis. So for them, this is it's a block to the gospel. That maybe that's how it should be. But I guess not. That's my opinion. Thank you.
So you can see why an evangelical would really struggle with what you just said, in that, if I understood you correctly, Paul was just operating with the pieces of the puzzle that he had handy.
Yes.
And so if he got things wrong about Adam, can I have great confidence with what he has to tell me about Christ?
So a part of it has to do, and I'm hesitant to jump into the epistemological point here, but I don't think humans know things and Bill, you're going to not like this because it gets into propositionalism. I don't think people know things in like bits and pieces of true fact, false, Like we create a picture of true and false facts. I think what people do is we have a kind of analogy for how we think the world works, how we describe it. And so, all of our perceptions of truth include some measure of error but it can be good enough to get you through, right? Only God has the full understanding of everything. I don't expect Paul to have a perfect view of the world to say things that are wise to me. I don't expect any of the biblical authors to do that. I go to church, my pastor preaches. I don't go, he makes mistakes sometimes, so I will not listen. I do that, actually. So I think it's a mistake to imagine that the natural ability of human language to convey truth is so limited that it can't be a meaningful medium for God to speak and to work. So I hope that gets at it. I think we're just pressing the text too much for what the text don't do.
Okay. There in the back.
On your view, Marcus, if there are Australopithecines and other hominids running about, those could be copulated with not only some sort of pre-human hominid. So there's just no reason to think that they engaged in that kind of bestiality. But if they did, then as I think someone said, it would be sinful and hardly unexpected from fallen humanity.
Mr. Brother, why is it that, let me restate that a little bit. Why does it seem to be that creationism has not gotten traction on our college campuses?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question, for bringing up that excellent film from 2007. I know a little bit of this type of behavior myself. I was nearly thrown out of my master's program at the South Dakota School of Mines and Tech. They knew I was a young earth creationist when I was accepted into the program, but they did not believe, I guess in their own minds, that that actually meant anything, that that was just a spiritual sort of thing that you believe, and it would be nothing that you could possibly bring to science, because in their view, science was only done by certain types of methodologically naturalistic rules, and to reject those rules in favor of something else meant that I must be, somehow devious, a liar for Jesus. Those were the sorts of fun phrases that were being thrown around at that time. So I'm very familiar with that. And even during my PhD time, Eugenie Scott, who featured ill prominently in the film, she called up my advisor, my PhD advisor, on 2 different occasions to let him know just what sort of person he had taken on as a student. He knew that very well, thanks, Jeannie. But so there are some people out there that view it as their profession to try and hurt people and to bully and to intimidate. I'm thankful that my PhD advisor didn't really care so much about what Jeannie Scott thought about me. So there is an active attack at times. That said, I went through my program from K through PhD in public schools. I never spent a day at a Christian school until I started teaching at Liberty University, where I could kind of do science the way that I thought it ought to be done. And I think that there's a lot of academic pressure going through programs, as I did, that selects away people who might be creationists, because you're going to face certain levels of persecution in your classes. You're going to face higher levels of persecution in your advanced coursework of master's and PhD, because now you're going to be a peer. And a peer is a different animal altogether than an undergraduate student. So you can get away with a lot when you're young, and you can't get away a lot with much else. But also, many of the wounds for young earth creationism are self-inflicted. We have not treated those who disagree with us very well at all in the past. I seek to change that. I have good friends who are evolutionists. I have good friends who are evolutionists who are Christians, and those who are non-Christians. It's going to take a while to build that reputation back up. And I can give a quick plug for, say, Cedarville University, whose geology program has been churning out students now for about 15 years. Some of them have now gone on to get their PhD. These are people who go to standard geological meetings. They present posters and papers of their research, and they have trained people who are training people in other places now. And it's an exciting time, actually, for young earth creationism. As we're seeing a development where the colleges and schools are beginning to emerge as major players in developing talent and thoughtful creationists who are interacting with those who disagree with them. And as that happens more, my hope and my prayer is that we'll see more young earth creationists in the academy who are able to represent the position at a scholarly level that's demanded of the academy.
On that note,